Welcome to Culture, Worldview, and Origins. This series is on critical thinking skills in science. This is Chapter 6, Knowledge and Wisdom, Session number 2. What we're looking at is defining the terms, defining critical thinking, defining science, defining the scientific method, and to understand what they mean. What you might say, well, I am a critical thinker. And a lot of different cultures do and would say they're critical thinkers, but they may not understand the technical definition of critical thinking, especially in science. And they are critical thinkers maybe in their way, in their culture, from their source of reliable knowledge according to their methods. But what critical thinking in science, in a Western way of thinking, what it means is something very specific and something very controlled and contained. Critical thinking and the definition of knowledge, wisdom. What we're going to look at is, okay, we're looking at critical thinking as a way, as a method of getting to reliable knowledge. We've defined reliable knowledge and found out that what is meant by that is justified true belief. So it's a belief system, but it's justified. Now there's other systems that produce maybe true beliefs also, but they can't be justified by the scientific method. Therefore, they're not accepted as reliable knowledge or a producer of reliable knowledge. But in all this, we're talking about knowledge. And so I thought it would be a good opportunity to put up some definitions. Let's define some things. Knowledge. In the early 12th century, I'm not even going to try to say the words that they're up there, that sinalese or whatever it is, meant the acknowledgement of a superior, honor, or worship. And that is the beginning and the root of our knowledge, is to acknowledge a superior, to honor and to worship, which is radically different from what we practice today as knowledge. From the late 14th century, it came to mean a capacity for knowing, understanding, familiarity, also as a fact or condition of knowing, awareness of a fact. You can tell by these general definitions that what it's talking about is knowledge. Cognitive thinking. Of course, we're talking about knowledge, but it's talking about things that have to do with investigation. It has to do with something exactly that produces numbers, that produces information. Whereas we're going to look at in another chapter what is meant by knowledge in other cultures, and it means something very distinct and very different. So that's what we're looking at. So just take notice that what it means by knowledge is the capacity for knowing, understanding, familiarity, fact or condition of knowing, awareness of a fact. The word knowledge today is defined as the acquaintance with facts, truths, or principles. Okay, so what we can gather from this knowledge today is what it started out as, an acknowledgement of something superior, something of honor, something worthy of worship. And usually those things are external. They're outside the person. Whereas the definition that we've adopted more today, it's our acquaintance within us of facts, truths, or principles, and it has to do with what we think. It has to do with not an external object of worship, but an internal nugget or just a sense of truth of something that is a thought pattern. Says, okay, as from study or investigation or general erudition. So in other words, how do we get this knowledge? The knowledge is through investigation, study, research. And that is a little different from a non-Western perspective that would say knowledge comes through experience of interaction with the outside world, not a sitting in a library studying facts or reading books. Knowledge is typically gained through books, research, and delving into facts. So that is what knowledge in a Western way has come to mean, and how you gain knowledge is through study. Where, like I said, we're going to go into it in other cultures, but that would not be their definition of knowledge from a non-Western perspective. The non-Western perspective is interactive, it's experience-based, it's knowledge of real world providing for the community in one way or another. If the community had to eat, and so you had to hunt, you had to be proficient at hunting, you had to have gotten that knowledge through experience to provide for your community or for your family. So it's a whole different perspective on what is knowledge. But the Western perspective of knowledge is book, something that you study, something that we gain through research and delving into the facts. So how do we know something? Well, this is the Western way of knowing. Comes from the Old English, and I'm not going to try to say that word again, a different word, but it's a verb, and it's to perceive a thing to be identical with another. Okay, what that has looks like is the logical positivism, where I can see something and it is identical to something else that I know. Whereas in the critical realist, it's kind of like you see something and it looks similar to something you know, but I could not claim that it is identical to it because of my perceptions of each item. So this one here says, perceive a thing to be identical with another, also be able to distinguish generally. Perceive or understand as a fact or truth. Okay, so this is what to know something is, to perceive it as a fact or as a truth. And again, going back to Stephen Jay Gould's quote that we're built on, is that, objectively, things do not come to us, facts do not come to us as objective items seen in the same unambiguous way. Okay, so how does that fit in here? Well, this definition says facts do come to us objectively and in an unambiguous way. And so I would be kind of, okay, I'm not in total agreement probably with this definition of it, because it is a definition proposed by a certain philosophical position. To perceive or understand as a fact or truth, as opposed to believe. Okay, so now we have knowledge and to know something is in direct opposition to believe something. But yet previously we had reliable knowledge that was defined as justified true belief. So it's kind of interwoven type thing here where knowledge is somehow, it's produced by a reliable method. If it's a reliable method, then it's truth. If it's not a reliable method, as the scientific method, then it is a belief. But yet actually all of our knowledge is a form of belief because it is produced by a system that we believe in as being credible to produce reliable knowledge. So I just wanted you to see how things are going here and to compare just what are definitions and how the definitions kind of change or overlap or use certain words as opposed to believe. Well, let's look at believe then. What is believe? What does that mean? Well, believe comes from Middle English by 11, which I don't know what by would be to. I don't know. From Old English, belly fun. Okay, I'm not even going to try to imagine where that came from, but it meant to have faith or confidence. Okay, so to believe is to have faith or confidence. And now we know today in philosophy in different ways is that faith is in direct opposition to reason. Faith and reason are on opposite poles or opposite levels. How you want them, they are not equals in any way. So to say that to believe is to have faith or confidence in something. The meaning, be persuaded of the truth. Okay, so that means I am persuaded that this is true, but it's not justified. It's not justified through logic. It's not justified through human reasoning. So that is a belief then. So it stays as a belief and not as knowledge if I haven't justified it through the approved method, which is the scientific method. Okay, the meaning of persuaded of the truth, the doctrine, system, religion, etc., is from the mid-13th century. The meaning credit upon the grounds of authority or testimony without complete demonstration except as true is from the early 14th century. Okay, so if I accept something as true based on the authority, and that's what my epistemology is, it's based on the second source of reliable knowledge is authority, external authority, which would be God and His revelation to us. And so that would be a belief because credit upon the grounds of authority or testimony without complete demonstration. Without complete demonstration how? Well, through the scientific method, which would be elaborating your hypothesis, submitting to observation, testing, empirical testing, and then reevaluation of the hypothesis. Not submitting that to that system then is to mean that it's a belief. So we're contrasting now knowledge and belief. To know and to believe. Those are two different very different words that describe knowledge that has been justified through the scientific method or knowledge that has not been justified through the scientific method. Then if it has not been justified through the scientific, then it's a belief. If it's something that has been justified through the scientific method, then it is reliable knowledge according to this system. Knowledge is defined as the acquaintance with facts, truths, or principles. Knowledge is gained through books, research, and delving into facts. Again, this is a Western way of defining knowledge. And all of these definitions come from the major sources of Webster's and other online dictionaries that are defining these terms. But what we can see is that knowledge defined in a Western mindset has to do with learning, but not by experience. It has to do with learning by book. It has to do with studying. It has to do with research. It has to do with delving into the facts. So this gives you a different idea of what is knowledge from the Western concept. So Western concept does not see knowledge as experiential, as coming from experience, as most non-Westerners would say that knowledge comes through tradition. It comes through authority. It comes through experience. It comes through, and yet none of those sources of knowledge would be accepted under or through the scientific method, which has been recognized as the only method that can and will produce reliable knowledge. So we're talking about science. So this is just, I thought, well, we're into definitions, so why don't we define one more thing? And we've looked at knowledge, and we've looked at know, as contrasted to belief, and kind of like, well, okay, let's look at science. What is science? Well, in the 12th century, it comes from Latin, scientia, which means knowledge, unknowing. Okay, that's scientia, knowledge, a type of knowing. In the mid-14th century, it says a state or fact of knowing. What is known? Knowledge of something acquired by study, information. Okay. You get it? What is science? Science comes from scientia. Scientia in Latin meant knowledge. So the scientific method is a method of knowledge to get to knowledge. So what we call science today was known as knowledge before, and its field of knowledge was very wide, amplified. Today it has been narrowed down so that knowledge means the scientific method, which means the knowledge method, the method of knowledge, is human reason, observation, and skepticism, which is to resubmit. So science, what is science did not come from a term that meant investigate, did not come from a term that means natural world, that comes to mean, it came from the word meaning knowledge. How do we get knowledge? And so that is what science, ciencia, is knowledge. State or fact of knowledge. What is known? Knowledge of, acquired by study, information. Also, assurance of knowledge, certitude, certainty, from the late 14th century in English as book learning. So again, we're coming back to knowledge. What is knowledge? And where did the word knowledge come from? And now we're looking at science. Where did the word science come from? And science basically comes from Latin, which means knowledge. So it's the same purpose. It has the same goal of generating knowledge. So science today that we practice is a practice that is to generate reliable knowledge, because that's what science is, and that's what it always meant, was reliable knowledge or knowledge. But now we separate down what is reliable knowledge. Reliable knowledge is that which is produced by a method that is reliable, which would be the scientific method, which is the human reasoning, the human observation, empiricism, and skepticism, which is rejecting anything that cannot be observed or subjected to human reason. Then that would be rejected as reliable knowledge, even if it be true. If it can't be justified by the scientific method, it is again rejected. So that wraps up this session on some of the definitions that we're working with knowledge, working with knowing, working with believing, and we're working with science. So those are kind of an interesting concept to keep in mind as to when we're talking about things is to have the same definition in mind or how it is defined. Again, we're Tim and Holly. If you'd like to communicate with us, you can through the addresses on the board here. And this is Chapter 6, Knowledge and Wisdom, and session number 2. Thank you again for joining me, and hope to see you in the next one.